Hey church! It's Sunday and we are preparing for worship, so I invite you to sit back and enjoy with me as we think about some Bible story and some of our news. So welcome to Sunday morning. I'm tired of hearing about coronavirus getting worse, aren't you? Aren't you tired of watching the number expand and then driving through town and watching people you care about not wearing masks or shields? Right now, we here in Littleton live in an area with less of the virus, but at the same time, there are people in our church right now who are waiting on results of COVID-19 tests. Others of you who are watching this live right now live in even higher areas of the virus. But it doesn't really matter, does it? Because potentially, at this point, almost anybody could have it. So I'm going to ask you to do something that feels uncomfortable. I'm going to ask you to wear a mask or a shield or both when you're out in public. Now, I know you've heard this on the news over and over again. You hear this everywhere, and yet not everybody's doing it. We see that as the numbers get worse and worse. Every time I have gone out into the wider public, I've tried to wear a mask or a shield, or both. Because I care about humanity, and I know you do too. So if you can just think about it, especially as we're coming closer to July 4th, I know there's a lot of people preparing for things, preparing to do events and stuff, so try to take care of your community and yourself. Now, there are places you can take it off, sure, like inside a restaurant once you are seated, or in a park when you're clearly away from other people. This is a small thing you can do. Throughout time, they have asked us to do different things over the world. Sometimes it was through a draft system, sometimes it was through movements, and people put their lives on the line. This time, we just have to do something very small and simple that can change the world. Not the president, not the governor, not the CDC. You and I have the potential to change the world, to stop this thing in its tracks. Through social distancing, personal protection equipment, being wise at your job when you're there, and staying home if you're able to. These are things we can do. We can blame whoever we want, but that's not what we're supposed to do as Christians, right? Or as people seeking the right way. We're not supposed to blame other people. We have to ask, what can we do? And in this moment, we can actually do something that can make a huge change in the world. Now, I know it feels like sacrifice. As somebody who has trouble breathing, those masks drive me crazy. But imagine the doctors and care providers that are wearing them for countless amounts of hours. And honestly, we all are sacrificing in different ways right now, aren't we? I don't know about you, but I can promise you, you're probably sacrificing something. I know I am. After 2 years and tens of thousands of dollars of trying to have a baby, I have to put that all on hold right now. I may not be able to even get it back up by the time it's done. Because it's not safe. At the end of this thing, I may not have that chance. I missed a proper ordination service after 20 years of being prepared for it. Some of you didn't get to graduate from high school. Some of you didn't get the wedding you planned. Some of you have experienced even worse things like loss of job and trying to figure out how to survive. And some of you have even felt a sacrifice that none of us wish would ever be a reality. The sacrifice of loss. The loss of a loved one, a family member, a friend, a neighbor. Sacrifice is part of this pandemic. And sadly, friends, sacrifice is part of life. It always has been. A couple times this week, people have asked me, when are we getting back in church? When are we getting back to the worship part of church inside the building? And it's a long process, friends. I'm in meeting after meeting having these conversations about what are the necessities for it. And in the last meeting, we had a pastor from Nashua who said that they had 5 people get the coronavirus and 2 had already died. Those kind of statements just stop the whole conversation, don't they? One person getting sick isn't worth it. I care about you. I care about worship. I want to be back too. I miss this. I miss us in that connection. That connection of seeing your faces, having the conversation, giving hugs. You're right. That's a sacrifice not to have that right now. But is our freedom to worship in a particular place trump the freedom of somebody's health? Sacrifice. We don't want to open our doors until we feel that it is safe and inclusive. Why am I saying all of this to you? You already know this, you say. Okay, I know. But why I'm saying it is it's worse in our country now than ever. While other countries have no cases, or very minimal cases, or have dropped dramatically down. And the truth is, the news is confusing. It's hard to know who to trust right now, where to get information. For one thing, the news keeps saying, and I'm going to look at my paper a minute so I say this exactly right. I'm going to talk to my non-senior friends for a minute. The news is saying that it's safe for you, but do you realize that while public messaging tends to tell younger groups of people they'll be spared from COVID-19 symptoms and its worse outcomes, that isn't quite right. No vigorous studies have supported this claim that younger people are more likely to be asymptomatic. So you think maybe, oh, I won't have any symptoms, but that doesn't show anywhere. On June 25th, the CDC has expanded its list of people at risk of severe COVID-19 to include all adults, saying more than just rather those over 65. Saying and said, yes, there is a caveat of the risk increases with age, but they've now included every adult in there. While deaths are more common among the elderly, clinical reports from the hardest hit areas like New York City and China have said that people under 50 actually suffer some very serious consequences from COVID-19 and are remaining hospitalized for as long, if not longer, than members of an older generation. This is National Geographic and from the CDC. And while governors and news outlets have reportedly cited adults under 50 are actually now the main cause of the COVID-19 cases surge. 25% of COVID hospitalizations in the U.S. since early March are showing to be young adults. We don't hear this enough, do we? We think it's safe unless you have underlying conditions, but that's not true. More and more we're finding that's not the truth. And I'm telling you all this because I think sometimes in life we hear something and it begins to process in our mind and then we say it doesn't apply to us. Too much of this world's issues are because we think things don't apply to us. Lately, the racism issue is centered around police brutality. Of course, because of the causes of what's risen up. But the truth is, it's not the police who are only racist at times. Racism is an institutionalized ism, just like sexism, just like homophobia. We can't just say it isn't us anymore on things. We can't say that with COVID-19. We can't say it with the issues in our world. We are part of systematic problems. We are part of our environmental issues. And if we are part of the problem, then friends, that means we are also part of the answers. We have the power. No matter how powerless you feel right now, you have the power to make change in this world. I worry about what's going to happen for the next couple decades when people will live with this COVID-19, that have been hospitalized, that have lung disease now, that never faced that before. What is that going to look like? As children and young adults grow into this virus, they'll feel the effects for the rest of their lives. But you could stop it with a mask or a shield or both. Washing your hands, staying safe when you can, making sure the employment place where you're working at is making the right steps to making you safe. I want church back, friends. I do. I want it back soon, but I don't want to put anybody in danger. Sorry. I miss you. I miss us. Now, I don't mean to be a downer. And I know it feels like it starts that way. But if one person thinks about this sermon and changes the way they act this week, then maybe that saves their life. Then it's all been worth it. Now, I'm especially being preachy because July 4th is coming up. And we're going to have a great patriotic sermon next week and everything. But as we head into this week, as you're preparing what you want to do, I want you just to think. Think a second longer than you might have about the actions that you take and the possible ramifications they have for you, your family, your community, in this world. Friends, this isn't a political discussion. It's not a Democrat or Republican discussion, a young or old discussion. This virus has no agenda beyond just multiplying. And we have the power to stop it in our tracks. This is what our faith tells us, that we as people have power. God has given us an opportunity to make change. God has allowed us to be part of God's creation, of God's creating atmosphere. That's a blessing, an opportunity. We can fight it together, but just saying we are all in this together isn't enough. We live in a very divisive time. It can be very depressing, I know. There are real issues that we need to work on. But fighting with fist, or by being defiant by not choosing to wear a mask, or going to help somebody that needs it, it doesn't mean we're truly in this together. We have to really want that. We have to want to be in it together. We have to want to claim our power. And I say this because this is the Friday, because this is the Sunday before next week, which is communion. That means traditionally this has been known as Preparation Sunday. This is the time we prepare our hearts and our minds for communion. Now, back in the day during the Reformation, you had people like Calvin who would insist that the Sunday before communion be a time of preparation, of claiming our role in issues in society, by claiming our need for forgiveness, by asking to truly see inside ourselves to see the sins within. And at the end of that Preparation Sunday worship, they would get a token, a communion token. And only with that communion token from the week before could they come to the next week to receive communion. And often they would have actual tables and they would have meals, but you had to bring that token with you that says that you had prepared yourself for communion, that you had done self-examination to see what you could have done. When we prepare our hearts and minds for the action of communion, we realize it's not just something that happens once a month, or in some denominations once a week, or in others a couple times a year. When we see communion for what it is, an act of true repentance, a new beginning, we need to acknowledge that we do have power in this. That we feel powerless, but the reminder is when we say we're powerless, it's almost a cop-out in our lives. As if we could say we can't do anything. It's not our fault. It ignores the sins that we're allowing to take place. To acknowledge that we've been part of a system that has not just allowed racism to spread, but has encouraged it. To admit that we're part of the issue with the virus. We can't just blame the virus. We have to see that we're part of what's going on. To see that we have taken wildlife from their homes as they now reclaim it. To see that the issue of pollution is changing, well, that says there was a problem with pollution to begin with. To say there are things in our own home that we need to work on, with our own families, with our own selves. To look deep inside and realize that we have some things we could change. And realize that's true for not just one problem, but many. And here's the beauty of Preparation Sunday. To know that next week is communion, and there is hope on the horizon, there is glory, there is peace, there is mercy to be received. It is a new beginning. But sometimes new beginnings require endings to happen. The first step in fixing a problem with ourselves is to realize that we have a problem that needs to be fixed. To own it. To really think, what is it we need to work on as people? What have we contributed that hasn't always been our best blessing into the world? No one is perfect. No one but Jesus. Now, I'm not talking about that nose being lopsided or that little toe that isn't the right shape you think. I'm talking about the things that God wishes we would do differently. The things that if Jesus were to yell at us and say, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. What are those things? That we would know automatically, yep, I did that, God. What are those things that we do that hurt Jesus? Now think about it. Because I promise you, we all have things, even the best Christians have things they need to work on. Is it maybe something that you're doing that hurts Jesus, like an addiction? Like an addiction to medicine, sugar, alcohol, shopping? Is it maybe abusive anger, pride? Fear? Are you not only allowing racism and sexism and homophobia to continue, are you part of the issue? Are you addicted to work or addicted to rest? Are you finding that you don't even want to get up? Are you finding that you're pulled down by your fears? Have you lost hope? Maybe do you have self-esteem issues? Too much or too little? Do you feel unseen and blame it on the rest for not seeing you? Or do you want everybody to see you all the time? Are you cutting ties with your children, your siblings, your parents? Are you holding on to anger? Are you letting past hurts dictate the future? These are all issues, friends. All things that in this time we can work on to say, what is it we need to do to make us stronger in the way of the Lord? I promise you that this is just a very short list. But the truth is, you know what it is that you need to work on. When you do prayer time with Jesus to prepare yourself for communion, you know what it is. We all do. There's a part of us inside that says, yep, probably is not the right thing, and I need to work on that. There is hope, friends. There is hope no matter what issue you feel you have. There is always hope, even in the darkness. Sometimes we need the darkness to find the hope. This week I gave the prayer for our district meeting, and I started with these borrowed words. Faith is seeing light with your heart when all your eyes see is darkness. People say that we're in a dark place in our country, that it feels hopeless at times, that we're in a dark place in ourselves. Our church is in a dark place as more and more people we love are diagnosed with illnesses, have strokes, car accidents, cancer, fires, grief, other deep pain. Where our friends are experiencing things like unemployment, religious persecution, the isms, child abuse, spousal abuse, and other horrible